So today we're talking about opening statements, and we're going to focus on a couple of finite skills within opening statements. We've talked about some of the things that are going to be part of opening statements before today. We've talked about them throughout this course. I want to refresh with some of the things that we've talked about already. You guys know that part of an opening statement involves sort of three key parts. That it involves that hook, that beginning part of an opening statement. Anytime you stand up for a jury address, you really have to think about it in the context of I have to use these first couple sentences, these first 30 seconds, as effectively as I can to grab people's attention and to get them invested and informed about my part of the case. So I talk about that as the hook. What are you going to do in those first couple sentences? What are you going to do in those first 30 seconds? The second thing that's unbelievably important, especially in an opening, is zoning in on your theme and your theory. Talking about why it is that you're going to prevail in this case, what is your theory of this case and why you win, and your theme is how you're going to help these jurors remember. How they're going to remember your theory, how they're going to remember your case. And the last thing that I talk about as it relates to parts of an opening or things you're looking to do in opening is this idea of a story and telling it as a story. But if you want people to remember your case, you have to couch it in terms of a story. There are people involved, there are events that happened, you can tell it and organize it like a story. And I'm going to talk about a specific technique that you can use, especially in opening, called previewing. I use this technique in opening as a way to not fall into two critical pitfalls that can come up. One, the main rule, and we're going to talk about it as I go through these slides, the main rule for opening is it's not time to argue. You can't argue. It's not the time, they haven't heard the evidence yet, and it's the one inappropriate thing that you can do during opening. Not time to argue. Don't argue. Objection, argumentative in opening, sustain. You cannot make your arguments before the show actually happened, before the trial is actually put on. Previewing can help. It can help you avoid those places where you have a tendency to get argumentative, where you want to argue. You can preview instead. The other thing that you can use previewing for is as it relates to things that you don't know about how it's going to shake out at trial. If you don't know how a witness is going to testify, if you don't know about the admissibility of certain evidence, if you don't know how events and circumstances at trial are going to shake out, previewing something you can do to make sure that you give yourself the best chance of success. That you can actually add interest, add intrigue to your case in opening, want them to pay attention, want them to be vested and informed in your story, yet you don't have to go into these pitfalls. You don't have to worry about argument, you don't have to worry about the parts of the case that you're not sure about. So let's talk about a couple of these things. First, as it relates to the hook, there's science that talks about this. You only have their attention for a little bit. If you want to stand up and do things that are boring, they're going to tune out. If you want to stand up and do things that they write about in certain books and the kind of old school way of thinking of saying, opening statement is not evidence, and you shouldn't consider anything I say. You just wasted a sentence and you took a step in the path of being really boring and them tuning you out. The same thing with, thank you all for coming. I appreciate that you have other things to do. I appreciate that you all have jobs, and we really thank you for your service. You just wasted 2 sentences and about 20 seconds, right? Don't use these first seconds, don't use these first sentences to go through things like this. Launch into your case. Launch into what is your theory of the case and why you win. Launch into that theme of your case and something that's going to resonate with the jurors emotionally and how they're going to remember your side of the story, how they're going to remember your theory of the case and why you win. So focus on what we're talking about here of how you're best going to use those opening statements. I have a different video on YouTube already as it relates to hook and a demonstration of how you can use these first sentences effectively in hook, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today. 2 to 4 sentences, clear statement. Use this time to introduce the theme. Instead, we see sometimes where you get these first 4 sentences and a student will go into, or a new lawyer will go into kind of the first couple of facts in the case. Well, again, that may not be a most effective use of your time. The first couple of facts, Johnny woke up that morning, isn't the most important fact. So it's not time for it to put it in your hook. Focus on the most important facts. Focus on the things that are going to lead them to side with your case, to side with your theory, to have your story resonate. Theme and theory, we've talked about this and I've already said it twice here today. The theory, when I talk to law students about the struggles they're having with their trial, with their final trial, with their mock trial packet, new lawyers with the new case that they have that's now heading to trial, this is where students have the problem, this is where new lawyers have the problem. How do I develop my theory? How is it that I go about selecting a theme? And all I can tell you is that it is a process. It's an editing process. If you can imagine that wastebasket over there and crumpled up pieces of paper, you should be trying on a bunch of themes. You should be trying out things to see how they work against how you've organized the case. A theory is something that through case analysis, like we'll talk about today, through case analysis you should start to understand what's the best way to give my side of the case, my client, or the government, if I'm operating as a prosecutor in the case, how do I give my side the best chance of success? And so for prosecutors, and I think you'll hear this from Professor Ross, it could be a little bit easier, right? We have a crime that we've alleged. It has elements. My theory of the case is that this defendant committed this crime, and I can satisfy those elements. So sometimes my theory, why I win, how I'm going to prevail here, sort of maps up to that jury instruction, to that crime, to those elements. You're going to hear more that they have to be more creative on the defense side, quite frankly. They have to think about, what is this alternative theory? What's another story that I can put before the jury that'll have them start to embrace that this could have happened a different way? That maybe all the facts and all the events don't happen the way that the prosecutors organize it and how they're presenting it to you. But think about these two things, and it is a process. And it's one of these that I think, with collaboration and working with other people, can get better. I've never put on a theme in a case where I haven't run it against people, and run it against people that I trust. What do you think about this? I'm thinking of using this as a theme in this trial with these facts. Here's how I'm going to use this theme. As it relates to witness credibility, I'm going to use it this one way. As it relates to this fact, I'm going to use it another way, and I try it out. And you know what? 50% of the time, sometimes I say, wow, that really helps me understand it, and I didn't know anything about this case. Sounds like a good theme. Other times, that confuses me. It takes more energy for me to learn what you're saying with your theme and distracts me from the message that you're trying to get at in your case. Sounds like it's not a good theme. So the way you want to approach it is, you want to try things on that are going to help people that don't know about your case, that don't know your story, that don't know your theory about how you're going to prevail. You need something that helps them. It could be a quote, could be an analogy, could be a saying, could be a word that can help them get there and help them remember it throughout your opening, throughout the case, and specifically throughout closing and deliberation and weeks later. You want them to remember your case and something that connects with them. So give them something that helps them remember it. That's what a theme is. And again, it's something to help them understand. The way I think about this is, think of advertising, right? Companies have already come before you, and they have to think about how they're going to communicate their products or how they're going to communicate their services to you, and they do it in some consistent way throughout all their commercial, throughout all their advertising, throughout all their promotional stuff. State Farm, like a good neighbor, right? That's something that you remember. If I say like a good neighbor, half of you think of State Farm. And they've thought of that as their theme. That doesn't actually mean anything in the context of insurance. It doesn't mean a thing. But what it can do is it can help us conjure up images of what the insurance company is getting at. Right? They're just our friend, they're just our neighbor. They're the one that's looking to help someone out. I can borrow a cup of sugar, right, from my neighbor. That's like State Farm. Wow, why wouldn't I want someone like that as my insurance company? Nike, just do it. Apple, I love this one. It's so simple, you already know how to use it. You take, a certain generation of folks, I'm in this one, that I don't want to buy the next computer, I don't want to buy the next product because I'm worried, how long do I have to do to, learn to do all that I want to do on this new piece of thing? Well, if they advertise with something as simple as you already know how to use it, that's a theme. And I think about all Apple products being branded under that theme. It's so simple, you already know how to use it. And you saw it with the presidential election as well. The big takeaway that I want you to have is I want them to remember what I was talking about. I can tell you, no matter how persuasive or how interesting your facts are, if you stand up in opening and just say, here's the case, here's fact number 1, and here's fact number 2, here's fact number 3, and you just go chronologically just presenting facts as if you're a newspaper reporter standing out in front of the courtroom, that's not going to be memorable. They may not remember it when they get to the first witness. Okay? If you organize it in a way where they will remember it, and it starts to resonate, and you put it under the umbrella of this theory, of this where you're going in this case, of this how am I going to prevail in this case, then all of a sudden it starts to resonate. If you connect it up with a word, or with a saying, or with a quote, I used to love taking quotes, but then not to actually take the actual quote that the famous person said, and I certainly wouldn't attribute it to that famous person, but what I would do, and I would think about is, I'd look at the way that language is oriented in these quotes, and I'd say, is there a way that I can take pieces of this language to represent my theme and have it apply to this case? And I'd use that to get ideas about themes, to try themes on. Like a book cover, Like a movie trailer, I'm trying these things on and seeing the ways that I can make it apply. And if I'm doing the real advanced thinking about how this is going to play out at trial, I also have to do the extra exercise of thinking, how is this theme going to be turned against me? How is the other side going to use this theme and say, yeah, you know what? This was a case where everything lined up. Everything lined up for the way that they were looking at it that's wrong, you know, and they figure out a way to turn it on you.